Doctors called her an invalid, frail, bedbound, barely fit to travel. And yet, she crossed the Rocky Mountains, the volcanoes of Hawaii, the interior of Japan, the high valleys of Tibet and Persia, almost always alone. At home, Isabella Bird was a patient. In the world, she was unstoppable. Yorkshire, 1831. In a country parson's house, a girl is born whom doctors will treat all her life for a spinal disease, for sleeplessness, for nervous complaints. Her medicine will be strange, not rest, but motion, not the sofa, but the open road. The sickly daughter becomes the most famous travel writer of the Victorian Empire, and in 1892, the first woman elected to the Royal Geographical Society in London. This is her life, from an English parsonage garden to the edges of the known world. Isabella Lucy Bird was born on October 15, 1831, in Boroughbridge, Yorkshire. Her father, Edward Bird, was a clergyman of the Church of England. The family was devout, educated, and well off. 3 years later, her younger sister Henrietta was born and would remain Isabella's closest confidant for life. But Isabella was a sick child. A disease of the spine tormented her, along with headaches and insomnia. Doctors prescribed what the age believed in, fresh air and open-air exercise. So Isabella learned to ride as a girl and found she was better in the saddle than in the drawing room. At 18, a tumor was removed from her back. The trouble stayed. She read, she watched the natural world, she wrote, and she sensed early that the quiet life of a gentleman's daughter would never cure her. In 1854, at 22, her father put her on a ship to North America to visit relatives, £100 in her pocket, with leave to stay until the money ran out. On that journey, her symptoms simply fell away. She wrote long letters home, and from those letters came her first book, The Englishwoman in America, 1856, published anonymously and a success. But every homecoming brought the illness back. In Edinburgh, where the family settled after her father's death, Isabella sank again into exhaustion and pain. It was the pattern of her whole life. On land, in domestic England, she was an invalid. The moment she traveled, she came alive. Only in 1872, past 40, did she set out on the journey that changed everything. She only meant to pass through, on her way to New Zealand and beyond. But a stop in the Sandwich Islands, today's Hawaii, held her for half a year. Isabella rode up the volcanic slopes, skirted glowing crater rims, crossed lava fields. She gave up the side saddle and rode astride like a man, safer, more practical, and later, in England, a scandal. From these months came the Hawaiian Archipelago, 1875. For the first time, an Englishwoman described this world not from a distance, but from the saddle, precise, vivid, fearless. Her readers at home were spellbound, a frail gentlewoman climbing volcanoes. But Hawaii was only the overture. On her way back, an uncle recommended a remote valley in the Rocky Mountains. It was called Estes Park. In the autumn of 1873, Isabella Bird reached Colorado. In Estes Park, a high valley at the foot of Long's Peak, she found her happiness. She rode alone through snow and canyons, covered more than 800 miles, drove cattle, slept in cabins. Here, a woman came alive who at home could barely manage a staircase. And here, she met a man who would fill her most famous pages. His name was James Nugent, but everyone called him Rocky Mountain Jim, a trapper with one eye, the other torn out by a grizzly. Feared, hard drinking, and yet a man of learning who recited poetry. He led Isabella up Long's Peak, more than 14,000 feet high. She was, she wrote, hauled up the last steep face like a bale of goods. Between the English lady and the desperado grew something she could barely name herself. A shadow already lay over the valley. An Irish aristocrat, the fourth Earl of Dunraven, had discovered Estes Park and meant to turn it into a private hunting preserve. By legal and questionable means, he seized thousands of acres, to the fury of the settlers. It was the world that Bird's beloved wilderness would soon be swallowed into. In December 1873, she left Estes Park with a heavy heart. They never met again. A few months after she left, Rocky Mountain Jim was shot by his neighbor, Griffith Evans, with whom he had long been at feud. Dying, Nugent named the man who fired. In court, Evans was acquitted. Isabella called his death a subject too painful to dwell upon. Her book about Colorado, A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains, made her famous for good. Bird's books grew out of letters, nearly all of them written to a single reader, her sister Henrietta. While Isabella crossed the world, Henrietta kept the home on the Scottish island of Mull. She was the first to read Isabella's adventures, to order them, to keep them safe. The Colorado letters became first a magazine serial in Leisure Hour, then, in 1879, a book. The famous traveler and the quiet sister, neither is imaginable without the other. In 1878, Isabella Bird set out for Japan, just 10 years after the country had opened to the West. She wanted not the treaty ports, but the interior, the north, the island of Hokkaido, where almost no European had walked. She traveled over 1,400 miles on horseback, through rough country, accompanied by a single young man. His name was Ito Tsurukichi, about 18 years old, at once interpreter, servant, and guide. Bird described him as clever and capable, sometimes sullen in the wilderness. In the north, she lived for a time among the Ainu, the indigenous people of Hokkaido, and recorded their world with rare precision. The journey became Unbeaten Tracks in Japan, 1880, one of her most important works. From Japan, Bird traveled on Hong Kong, Canton, Saigon, Singapore, and 5 weeks through the Malay states, through jungle and on elephant back. That too became a book, The Golden Chersonese and the Way Thither, 1883. But while Isabella crossed the tropics, a message was nearing home that would cut her life in half. In 1880, Henrietta died of typhoid. For Isabella, a world collapsed. The reader of all her letters, the anchor of her life, was gone. Through Henrietta's last weeks, an Edinburgh doctor attended her, Dr. John Bishop, who had courted Isabella for years and been refused more than once. Now, in shared grief, she accepted him. In February 1881, they married. The happiness was brief. By 1886, John Bishop was dead after a long illness. In her mid-50s, Isabella Bird was alone a second time, sister and husband both lost, and a sizable inheritance in hand. Another woman might have withdrawn. Bird did the opposite. She trained in nursing and resolved that her traveling would now serve others. The mourner became a woman with a new purpose. In 1889, almost 60, Isabella Bird traveled to India, this time not only as an observer, but as a helper. From her husband's legacy, and in his memory, she founded the John Bishop Memorial Hospital in Srinagar, a second hospital in Amritsar she dedicated to her sister. Then she pressed on where almost no European woman had reached, through Ladakh to the edge of Tibet. From India, she went on to Persia, Kurdistan, and Turkey, often on mules, through frozen passes, past the frozen dead. British officials complained that her recklessness was a constant worry. Bird herself, wrapped in thick wool and fur, wrote of blasts that swept everything away. Out of these hardships came Journeys in Persia and Kurdistan, 1891. Past 60, she was no longer a traveler taking a cure. She was a geographer in the field. In 1892, a decision was taken that made history. The Royal Geographical Society in London admitted women as elected members for the first time, and Isabella Bird was among them. An elected member of this society, known as a fellow, was then a high scientific honor, until that moment closed to women. Bird, a celebrated author and tireless traveler, was the obvious choice. But the resistance was fierce. Its loudest voice was George Nathaniel Curzon, later Viceroy of India, then a member of the Society's council. In a letter to The Times in May 1893, he declared women unfit by sex and training for exploration and mocked traveling women as an affront of the age. The Society reversed course and shut the door to further women until 1913. Bird, though, remained what she was: elected, recognized, inside. In 1892, Isabella Bird also learned photography and became a chronicler in pictures. On her last great journeys, 1894 to 1897, she crossed Korea and China. She was the first woman to travel up the Yangtze, far into the interior, capturing people and places with her camera. From these years came two books, Korea and Her Neighbors, 1898, and The Yangtze Valley and Beyond, 1899. These journeys were no stroll. In China, Bird was caught in anti-foreign unrest and barely escaped. Back in Britain, she spoke before committees about the atrocities against the Armenians she had witnessed on her travels. By now, she was far more than a travel writer. She was a public voice, heard in learned societies, universities, and the circles of Parliament. In 1901, at 70, Isabella Bird set out one last time for Morocco, where she rode among the Berbers on a horse so tall she had to be lifted onto it. She was already planning a new journey to China. But a few months after her return, she fell ill. On October 7, 1904, Isabella Bird died in Edinburgh, almost 73. She was buried in Dean Cemetery. What remains is a woman who moved every limit set for her: the limit of illness, of her sex, of her age. 9 travel books, thousands of miles on horseback, a camera, 2 hospitals, and a place in a society that had wanted to keep women out. The sick parson's daughter from Yorkshire became the first woman of the Royal Geographical Society, and the proof that a world thought too fragile at home could be unstoppable abroad. Yorkshire, 1831, to Edinburgh, 1904. In between lay the whole earth.